You're walking somewhere, just an ordinary day. Then a smell drifts in, and suddenly you're not there anymore. You're 8 years old, you're standing in your grandmother's kitchen. The warmth of something fresh from the oven is on your face. You hadn't thought about that moment in years, but now you're there. You're completely there. You can look at a photograph and say, "Ah, a nice memory." You can hear a song and smile a little. But a smell is different. A smell doesn't pull you back, it throws you there. No wall, no warning. 1 second you're here, and the next you're 30 years in the past. And you probably never wondered why. But the real answer is far stranger than you'd expect, because this is not an accident. This is a trick played on you by millions of years of your brain's architecture. And the rules of that trick were written long before you were born. Let's start here. You have 5 senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. 4 of them follow the same path. When you see something, that information first travels to a kind of switchboard operator in your brain. This switchboard is called the thalamus. The thalamus lines up every incoming signal, labels it, and routes it to the right place. Sight passes through the thalamus, hearing passes through the thalamus, touch does too, but smell does not. Smell is the one exception. When you catch a scent, that signal skips the switchboard operator. It bypasses the middleman, and it dives straight down into the oldest, deepest layers of your brain. And when it arrives, where does it land? 2 places, the amygdala and the hippocampus. These 2 names might sound complicated, but their jobs are simple. The amygdala is your emotion center: fear, excitement, love, disgust. The hippocampus is your memory recorder, the place that stores when and where you live the moment. And smell is the only sense that connects directly to these 2 without passing through any other gate. Now do you see why it's so powerful? When you catch a scent, you're firing your emotion center and your memory recorder at the exact same time. While the other senses pass through the logic switchboard first, smell drops straight into your heart. That's why an image reminds you of a memory, but a smell makes you relive it. There's a neuroscientist at Harvard. His name is Venkatesh Murthy. He studies smell and the brain. And what he describes is exactly this. The olfactory system is wired directly, like a short circuit, to the regions of the brain that govern emotion and memory. No other sense sits this close. Smell is, quite literally, the shortest road back to your past. But let's go deeper, because the real question is this. Why? Why is your brain built this way? Why does smell get to cut every line like a privileged passenger? For the answer, you have to go far back. Before you, before humans, before the first eyes ever formed. Think about the oldest living things on Earth. Small, simple, drifting in the dark. They had no eyes, they had no ears, they had no fingers to touch anything. The only thing they had was the ability to read chemistry. A molecule in the water, a trace, a signal. Food is this way, danger is this way, a mate is this way. Smell was the first sense. Before sight, before hearing, smell was the first way life ever perceived the world. And the oldest part of your brain was built for exactly this job. Read the chemistry, make a decision, stay alive. Millions of years passed. Eyes formed, ears formed, the brain grew, adding layer upon layer, becoming more complex. But that old smell center never went anywhere. It wasn't torn out and thrown away. It just stayed underneath the newer brain, at the very bottom of the foundation, right beside emotion and memory. Because that's where it moved in first. That's why today, when you catch a scent, you're actually running humanity's oldest brain circuits. Not a calculator, a survival alarm. So why does that matter? Because staying alive requires being fast. For your ancestors, smell wasn't a dictionary, it was a decision-making machine. When the smell of smoke arrived, there was no time to think, this might be the oxidized compounds of burning wood. They just needed to feel something, fear, and they needed to run. When the smell of rotting meat arrived, they didn't need to analyze it. They needed to feel disgust and pull away. That's exactly why smell speaks in emotions, not in words. Have you ever noticed this? Describing a smell is almost impossible. You can describe a color. You can imitate a sound. But a smell, you can only explain it by comparing it to something else. Like the earth after rain. Like my grandmother's house. You have no words for it. Because smell never visits your language brain. It goes straight to feeling. This is not a flaw. This is the design itself. And this is where Rachel Herz comes in. Rachel Herz is a cognitive neuroscientist who studies smell and emotion. For over 30 years, she's been examining a single question. Why do smells affect us so deeply? And one of her experiments measured exactly the thing you feel. The experiment was simple. She reminded people of the same memory in two different ways. One group saw something related to that memory, triggered by an image. The other group smelled the scent of that memory. Then she asked everyone, how emotional did this memory feel? How vivid? How much did it take you back? The result was clear. Memories triggered by scent were far more emotional than those triggered by an image. They were more vivid. They genuinely teleported people into the past. Hertz gave it a name, the Proust effect. So where does that name come from? Over 100 years ago, there was a French writer named Marcel Proust. One day, he dipped a small cake into a cup of tea, an ordinary cake called a madeleine. And when that cake touched the tea, the smell and taste suddenly threw him back into his childhood. An entire lost world returned from a single bite. He wrote about that moment for pages. And 100 years later, science proved him right. What the writer felt was real. His brain's architecture allowed it. Now stop for a second and think about this. You live with madeleines every single day and you don't even notice. A perfume, the pages of an old book, a certain soap, asphalt soaked after the rain, the smell of a school hallway. Any one of these can carry you back years in a single second. And before it takes you, you get no warning. Because smell doesn't knock on the door. Smell is already inside. But here's where the truly strange part begins. Why are these memories so old? Why does smell take you not to last week, but to your childhood? Hertz and other researchers studied this too, and what they noticed was this. Memories triggered by scent came, on average, from much earlier years. While an image or a word takes you to the recent past, a smell takes you all the way back to your earliest years. Why? Because wherever you first experienced a smell in your life, your brain seals it there. Think about it. You probably first smelled that certain spice when you were very young. You first smelled that soap as a child. And when your brain pairs a smell with a memory for the first time, it forms that bond extraordinarily strongly. Any experience that comes after can't overwrite that first seal. That's why smell always takes you back to the very beginning, to the oldest records, to the first moment you ever felt that chemistry. Your brain isn't using smell like a time machine. It's using smell like an anchor. And that anchor is always dropped at the deepest, oldest point. So what does all of this mean for you today? It means this. You live with smells far more than you think you do. You can't always tell why you suddenly relax or grow uneasy the moment you walk into a room. You may not understand why you feel strangely safe around certain people. You can't figure out why an unexplainable longing rises in your chest when a certain season arrives. Very often, the reason is a smell, an invisible trace pulling your emotions directly, without ever reaching your awareness. You think you live by your logic, but the oldest part of your brain is still sitting there, still smelling the air, still making decisions, still telling you what to feel, just as it did millions of years ago, before you even understand what happened. And maybe that's the most beautiful part. When someone you love is gone, they leave a smell behind, on a pillow, on a sweater. And when you lean into that fabric, you bring them back for a moment, more vivid than their photograph, closer than a recording of their voice. Because smell touches the most honest, oldest, deepest language your brain has. What words forget, smell remembers. So the next time you're walking somewhere on an ordinary day and a smell drifts in, and suddenly you're not there, don't panic. Your brain is just handing you a gift, millions of years in the making, the shortest road backward through time. And that road is always open. You're walking somewhere, just an ordinary day, then a smell drifts in. And now you know that moment is no accident. It's the oldest voice your ancestors ever left you, and it's telling you one single thing. Remember.